I'm just going. We're going on the air right now. I'll let you know when we're live. When we're
So this is live.
Yeah,
okay.
On YouTube.
Excellent. Okay.
All right.
So this is live.
Yeah, we are good. I think everyone can hear us. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Chit, Geek Out. I'm your host, Steven. Today on the show, we are joined by music composer Christopher Young. You guys may know him best from his work from doing the Hellraiser score and movies such as Sinister and Drag Me to Hell, as well as countless others, which I love. And yeah, welcome, sir. How are you today?
I'm thrilled to be here, Steven. Thank you very much for having me on board.
Thank you.
To all those who are watching, thank you for listening and including me in this wonderful chance to kind of reach out to you all and talk about music for movies. Yeah. I guess scary movies. Yes.
Yeah, my channel mainly revolves around the horror genre. I love it so much. I've loved horror since I was a kid. And yeah, if anyone in the live chat, I do have a live chat open. So if you guys have any questions for Christopher, do just let me know. And I'll try to get to a few of them. I'm going to start off the show. I know you're always busy. You have a lot. Yeah, if you guys go to his IMDb page, he has countless amount of credits. I'm actually looking right now. He has 127 credits. So you're bound to have heard something by him in one of the movies that you've watched. And yeah, so, you're always busy. What have you been up to recently? What's some upcoming projects you would like to plug?
Well, you know what? I am actually just closing a deal on a film that came to my attention last week, a scary film. And I would love to mention the name. If this interview was happening like 48 hours later, I could drop the name, but I'm kind of reluctant right now. Suffice to say, I'm extremely excited about it because it is a scary movie. I don't like to call them horror movies, a scary movie with depth, with great depth. And there's a religious undertone to the entire story, which makes it exciting. I wish I could tell you the name of it, but I can't. This is kind of the weird thing. So excuse me.
That's okay. You got to let the anticipation build. You got to have people in curiosity. So, and guys, make sure to follow him. If you're not yet following him on social media, he's on pretty much all the platforms. All the links are below. I left the link to his website, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and IMDb, as well to his Spotify and Apple Music, so you guys can listen to some of his work there. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited. Yeah, all your projects are pretty much listed on IMDb and your website on what you're up to. I know that your website had a new film on it. I'm just looking at the name of it. Is The Empty Man. Yeah.
The Empty Man came out last year, and that was directed by first-time director-writer David Pryor, who I met. He was a film music fan of the highest caliber, and he came to a signing that I did years ago, and he came up to me and we hit it off immediately. He said, when I finally get a chance to direct a feature, I'm definitely coming to you. And he stayed true to his commitment to that. It was a Fox, a Disney release, and was a great opportunity to do some new kooky, crazy things that I love to do and to try to expand the horizon with the language that I've used in the past. That's always the objective, is to try to kind of reinvent myself. And he was encouraging me to do that. So things I did in that I'd never done before, which is good. And I got to collaborate with a guy named Lustmord, who was like one of the leaders in the world of ambient industrial music. And so that was different. That was good. Wait. But the film is weird as a mother. You got to see this movie.
I haven't seen it yet. It looks interesting, though. I will make sure to give it a watch.
It's one of these I call mind F movies, if you know what I mean. About a person who loses track of their own identity. And, it's kind of like if you ever saw the film Angel Heart, I'd say it's kind of in that world, the Mickey Rourke movie, where you look into the mirror, you're accustomed to seeing something in the mirror, and know the person that you're looking at when you look into the mirror. And over the time of this the period of this person's life in the movie, it gets to the point where he has complete lost control of understanding who he is. He discovers that he's not anything that who he thought he was. So it's one of those lost identity films that's done in the best of ways, and it's frightening and whatever. A great watch, and the opportunities musically were fantastic.
Yeah, sounds very psychological.
Yeah, no, very good. Head stuff.
So, you've been around doing composing for a long time, and I remember because I watched a lot of interviews of yours before I'm interviewing you today, and one of the first times you had an opportunity to change things up a bit was doing the Cinesearch soundtrack. So, from composing from back in the day, doing the Hellraiser stuff until now, technology has come such a long way on how we edit and make music now. How do you... I'm trying to find the right wording. I mean, like, if you pretty much have modern technology helping make music, as I said. So do you find that very useful for the most part, or do you still like doing things on the actual instrument instead of it doing everything electronic?
Right. I'd say I'm still old school in that I insist that I work it out in my head before I, start using technology to manifest those ideas. I don't, I won't run to, the computer, the keyboard to help guide me and to force things on me by stumbling into libraries that create the language for me. Rather, I will, really go inward and try to imagine sounds, which I then explore and create. I use factory stuff, but not much of it, and it's always modified somehow. So my greatest enjoyment is to create my own sounds that are specially crafted for that movie, and to use my experience having done traditional scores to organize those sounds in a way that is, though the sounds aren't tonal, the way and the methods in which the sounds are organized come from someone who spent a lot of his time writing tonal music. Most younger composers who are working exclusively in the electronic world are not, that's the language that they understand, and there's certain aspects of writing with the computer that are more comfortable, and you kind of fall into what is the most comfortable kind of things that come out of the machine, and you modify your thinking to accommodate what the machine does best. And I've kind of always kind of fought that. So you asked the question, I see this one of these questions, you said modern technology helping make music. And my answer to that one, this is because it's along the same line as what you're asking me here, is no, actually, in fact, technology doesn't make the music good. It's the composers that make the music good. And they use technology as needed to ensure that it accommodates what's going on in their head. Does that kind of make sense?
Oh yes, most definitely. Because back in the day, we didn't have all these editing softwares on the computer, but now we have so many ways of improving music and remastering it to make it sound so much sharper and cleaner, and just add a lot of more elements to it.
Yeah, no, that's all great, and it's certainly I've benefited immensely from using technology. But again, I thank my lucky stars that I started pre home studio synth setup kind of thing. That's just, it's a good way of grounding yourself in the mechanics of making non-sound design music work. And when I started, of course, all 98% of all film music was comprised of, live instrumental music that was held together by, themes. And the composer had to be able to write catchy tunes and then know how to play around with those tunes over the course of the movie. And, when we think of great scores from yesteryear, you can sort of boil them down to, like I said, one or more, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 themes that are pretty much instantly memorable, that you can watch the composer modify them over the course of the movie. As the drama develops, so does the music. And that's sort of where I'm at. I love technology. In the electronic world, there's things that happen by chance, things that become available to you sonically that could never happen without that technology being available. So especially in the world of scary movies, sounds are critical, and to be able to have at your access the ability now to do things that, now in the 80s when I first started, you would record stuff onto whatever 2-inch tape or 1-inch tape or whatever, 1/2-inch tape, and then do simple manipulations with it. Slowing it down or speeding it up, playing it backwards, adding delays, filtering it, reverbs, nothing too fancy. But now you can take that exact same material and mutate it to the point where you don't even recognize the source.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I directed my first horror short film in September of last year, and it was a really interesting experience for me because it was my first time ever making a movie, and post production with the composing, such an interesting process because we had a lot of distorting sounds like siren sounds. So it was really cool going through so many different drafts and seeing what areas needed like improvement or what needed to be added in. And no, I mean I've always been a fan of soundtracks, I should say. Yeah. I think music's such an important part of any film. So that's pretty much, especially for horror films, that's what gives you the chills and the jump scares is the music. So it was really interesting process because I love horror and my first horror film I ever made. So yeah, it was really a lot of fun. And I gotta say, the Sinister soundtrack that you did, it's a disturbing movie as it is, but the soundtrack is just it makes you so uncomfortable when you're watching it. Especially that ending track with that little ticking sound, like an empty 8 B roll, whatever it's called, with Super 8. It's like that sound, ticking over.
Are you talking about the film itself? Or are you talking about the CD that came out?
No, I'm just talking about like the film and the music in general in the movie. Like the music is just makes it so unsettling. You did such a good job, and I know you did something different for that film because you did, as you said, you did it. It was more digitally electronic music.
That's right. Yeah, I've been wanting to do that for a long time, and it's not like I haven't included electronics with the acoustic stuff, but never really have I been in a situation where, because of the budget, Scott Derrickson, the director, turned to me at the onset and he said, "Listen, we don't have any money to do anything but electronic stuff here, but I know, this is not something you've done a lot of, but this could work to the film's advantage actually, because I don't see it being, a normal whatever orchestral or instrumental score." So yes, the budget got me on that path, and since Hellraiser, so many of the calls that I've gotten have been for me to do more of kind of the same, which is Yeah, give us the big orchestra. That's
Yes, I love it. I
that's
love
what you do. And I love writing for orchestras. You better believe it. But this was a great opportunity. Of, was something that I wanted to do an all synth thing, and so it allowed that part of my musical personality come out of the closet or whatever.
it.
I'm very lucky it happened. And the CD itself, if you ever get a chance to hear that, I reworked the crap out of the stuff to make it work, I think, better on the CD. Because often with horror ambient scores, though they can work extremely well in the film, when it comes time to releasing them on CD, sometimes they're a hard listen, and so because they're not following the same kind of rules that tonal music follows, so they could get float around and get lost. So my mission was to try to figure out a way to organize the music so that someone listening to it would go, oh yeah, I got it. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's what I tried to do, at least.
Yeah, no, it's super good. And one of my other questions for you is, because I'm sure this happened to you, like in the process of making new scores, is through your time making music, what has been your favorite happy mistake? Something that wasn't planned when you were doing a score, but it just kind of came naturally and it was a surprise to you and it worked.
Well, I noticed that question, and that's a tough one. I can tell you this much, that in the early days, before synths, home studios, before you either wrote at the computer and created your cue there that was completed by the time you finished inputting the parts and was ready to play it to the director, before that, all you had was an upright piano or a piano and paper and pencil. So when the director came over, you were sitting at the piano, and if this is even at the beginning, this is pre-video. So I didn't even have an image for the director to see me play the piano against. That happened later on. But again, to synchronize to the picture was not an easy thing. You would play at the piano your cue and have to describe to the director what the instruments were going to be. So you had to be really good at selling the material and to be able to pretend like you were the strings or the brass or the percussion so that he would get an idea. So in answer to your question, you finish the score. Now, if you had the money for an orchestrator, it meant that the music had gone through someone else's head, and they were able to check it out, and you could have a conversation about what you'd written. But in the early days, like in Hellraiser, there was no money for orchestrators. So really, at the end of the day, I was the only guy who had really heard it in my head. I'd never heard it, in reality. It was all stuff in my head. So I would go on the stage and be hearing it, literally everything, for the first time. And so would the director. Of course, so there was always that shock factor. Does this sound the way I'm expecting it to sound like?
Exactly.
And of course, you're looking at the director and going, is this kind of what you thought it would sound like? Now with mock-ups, they can hear everything in advance. And in some instances, if they approve of the mock-up, they won't even feel the need to be at the scoring session if they're busy. But here they had to be at the scoring session. So in answer to your question, I have memories of some of the earlier films where I'd write a cue, and you hope that 80% of it is pretty much just what you imagined it would be. There's always that 10% which doesn't work out the way you expect. You hope it's only 10%. Maybe sometimes it's more. But let's say 10% of it doesn't work out the way it doesn't sound what you expected, and you probably make changes on the stage to make it sound better. But the exciting stuff is that 10% that you thought would turn out a certain way, and it actually turns out better. all of a sudden the orchestra plays it back and you go, oh my God, this sounds really good. My God, I'm surprised. It wasn't a mistake. It just was a happy discovery.
Exactly.
That what you wrote was actually better than what you thought you wrote, And I can just remember going way, way back. I'm thinking of this particular movie. It was back when I just started and I was trying to prove myself to a company called New World Pictures, who released Hellraiser. And it was my trial by fire. There was a movie called DEFCON 4, which was a post-apocalyptic sci-fi film that they released. And I did this really weird and wacky main title that used a lot of sound mass and marimbas, and it was pretty crazy. And there's no way I was going to be able to play this for the director on the piano. I just had to describe it to him. And I'm sure he was like wondering, what the hell is this going to sound like? Well, we went on the stage and I had pre-recorded 6 marimbas, and then we double tracked the orchestra because it was a small orchestra. And by the time things were finished, it was pretty exciting, I must say. And it surprised me because it wasn't a tuneful main title. It was very clustery and made you think of like it's the end of the world kind of music. And so that was exciting. That's a perfect example of what I was talking about, that 10% that you go on the stage and you go, holy moly, wow. Yeah, and you can see everybody in the room smiling and going, what has he done here? And I go, I'm not exactly sure. I had to play the part like I really knew this is exactly the way it was going to sound. So that's kind of a happy accident. When you're in the electronic world, happy accidents happen all the time.
Yes, I was thinking the exact same thing too.
Yeah, I mean, constantly you have a sound and it doesn't seem to be working until you do some simple modification to it, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, yeah, this is, now it's alive. Now it means something.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. That was a good way to answer that question. And through that time too, with doing music digitally and also, doing it, from the actual instrument itself, what have you found the most terrifying sound or snippet that you've come up with in your process of making film scores?
Okay, it's another thing. In fact, music on its own is not terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Music only becomes terrifying when it's connected to an image, which is terrifying. The music that I listened to, that I used as sort of a framework for what I do when I'm really getting crazy and doing blocks of non-tonal sound. These moments were definitely kind of like inspired, or I learned by how to do this stuff by studying composers like Penderecki and Ligeti and Lutoslawski, this Polish school kind of way of writing music. Now I'm doing it my own way, hopefully, but when they wrote this cluster stuff, and you hear it, by the way, you hear a lot of Penderecki stuff in the movie The Shining, and he didn't write that stuff to frighten anybody. From his perspective, as I've always said, I listen to that kind of music and I'm not frightened, rather I'm enlightened. I feel like the music is speaking or illustrating or illuminating something dark or something invisible or something even divine, something that speaks of and I hate to sound corny, but to me, often I feel like it's the voice of God I'm listening to, or I'm deep in an outer space. I know it sounds really corny, but not of this earth at this moment. But I'm not frightened by it. I'm mystified by it and slightly frightened, but not terrified. So I guess I don't, when I listen to my crazy cluster stuff, I don't think of any moment as being like, this is really terrifying music. It's not till it's put to an image which is grotesque or monstrous or truly frightening that it can become terrifying.
Yes.
Same thing with the Penderecki stuff. The very same music that you hear in The Shining, if you were to hear that removed from the movie, and if it had never been used in the movie,
it would be completely different.
Would you call it frightening music? I don't think so.
Yeah.
You might call it really weird and out there and experimental, but frightening, I don't know. Now, in answer to your question, what is the most frightening thing, music that I've written? What that means is at what scene in what movie
Yes.
did music add to what was going on in the picture, which was truly frightening to begin with, that brought it to a higher level.
You've done so many good ones. It's probably hard to pinpoint.
I really can't pick one, but I can tell you this much, that there's a lot of times when I've tried to do that.
Right.
But it all depends upon how loud the music is mixed. You can have a truly frightening piece of music written for a scene, and if it's played quietly, it's not going to have that impact. Imagine, if you would, the music for the shower sequence in Psycho, a classic scary scene where the music is, I guess, frightening because the image is frightening. She's getting stabbed. If she was smoking a cigarette on a porch, looking at the ocean, over a lake, and that music was going on, we wouldn't think it was frightening. We'd think it was inappropriate for the scene, but we wouldn't necessarily think it was frightening music. She's getting murdered in the shower, and the music is blasting, and together they work like butter. But if it was mixed really low and they had the sound of the shower really loudly, it wouldn't have had the impact that it does. It has an historical impact, that music does. If the motive for the shark in Jaws was played quietly, we wouldn't have screamed. So it's required. You have to play it loud.
Yes.
I think it's important the music swallow the scene. So there's so many more. I can't pick one. There's not one that jumps into my head. But I can tell you for sure that if it's a moment that succeeds, chances are it will be a scene in which I'm thinking the music is active and loud enough to really make that emotion happen. I'm sorry I can't be more specific.
No, don't be sorry. No, because it's a hard question to answer, but music's such a powerful thing, and when you see it in movies, it really does stand out. And over time, when you've done scoring, because you've scored so many movies, maybe like what piece of yours are you most proud of throughout all this time in history from doing composing? Like, what's your all-time favorite? The favorite,
in the scary world, that also is extremely hard to answer.
You've done so many different genres.
I don't have a favorite one. I have ones that stand out as being like important ones.
Right.
Of course, the very first film I did when I was at UCLA, which was a horror film, is my least favorite score that I wrote because I was still trying to figure out who I was. It was called The Dawn That Dripped Blood. But that goes into my, that's definitely one of my favorite, an important moment. Hellraiser was an important moment and one of my favorite scores, I guess. I like the score and I like the movie. I love the movie and I guess I like the score. Other pictures that jump out at me as being some of my favorite ones are often the more experimental ones. The ones in which I'm not, I'm going off the deep end. There was a film called The Vagrant that was an odd picture that was produced by Mel Brooks.
Yeah, I was listening to that one.
Okay. I think that's pretty weird. You know,
Yeah.
that's a different one. It's not quite like anything else you've heard. It's a black comedy, so it's light and it's both dark and light, tongue-in-cheek horror. That's not an easy thing to do. Drag Me to Hell, of course, was an important one. The Sam Raimi movie. You know, Sinister was great. I mean, there's so many. I can't pick out an absolute favorite in that world.
I think it's also because from you composing all these different projects, they all offer something different. So you've kind of, I want to say too, being a composer, you probably learn something all the time because like this goes so well with this. I have to keep this in mind next time I do a similar project like this. So it's like, no, I mean, they all offer something different. So I'm sure it's hard to answer that question.
Oh yeah, but yes, the weird ones. The thrown out score for Invaders from Mars. That's a weird one. I mean, there's a lot of them that are super weird that are like, okay, that they're not quite like anything you've heard before, and maybe are not easy to swallow, but nonetheless, you can see an effort is being made to be weird.
Mm-hmm. You've also collabed with a lot of different composers. Is there anybody in mind that you would love to compose with that you haven't yet?
You know, you know, it's funny because I looked at that one and I went, Jesus.
There's so many good ones.
I mean, who would I like? And I go, well, Jesus. You know, I mean, you're asking me who would I if I could have my dream collaboration, who would it be with? Paul McCartney. You know, I mean, of course, he's in an entirely different world, but I would love to be able to do something with him for sure. I'm from New Jersey, from the same hometown, basically as Bruce Springsteen, you know, something like that. These are all pop people, but I think this could be an interesting interaction, you know, and certainly I could benefit greatly from interacting with someone who has that much visibility. In the, you know, again, staying in the rock world, you know, I was very much into Emerson, Lake and Palmer. I like their stuff, the prog rock thing. Keith Emerson is no longer with us. I would have loved to have collaborated with him. A group called Procol Harum, when I was a kid, was a sort of, I guess prog rock group that I was very much into. The guy who wrote most of the material for them was called Gary Brooker. Guy, it'd be fun to collaborate with him. In the classical world, there's so many. Off the top of my head, I'd say John Corigliano. He's a living composer who did some film scores like Altered States and a few others, The Red Violin and Revolution. I love his stuff. He'd be great to collaborate with. I guess Philip Glass would be a remarkable guy to have the opportunity to interact with. But again, that list is pretty endless. There's so many in the classical world I'd love to collaborate with. In the, you know, jazz world, again, an endless list of people. Herbie Hancock, that would have been that'd be an exciting collaboration. Anyway, you know, I don't even really know where to start with that. But I would say, Brian Wilson, for crying out loud. I have dreams about Brian Wilson. I have dreams about Paul McCartney for sure. So any of these guys, that'd be kind of cool and fun. Brian Wilson, that'd be great, man.
Maybe one of them will see this video. Maybe they'll reach out to you.
What's that?
I said maybe one of those people will see this video and reach out to you.
Maybe, yeah.
Do you ever, before writing a score? I know I've listened to other interviews with your process on how you start a score. Are you one of those people that listens to like a score, like from a movie you really like, to kind of get inspiration and get ideas rolling? I'm sure you did that more in your earlier days, and maybe I don't know if you do that so much anymore because you know so much about music now.
Right. You're exactly right. When I started, I'd get a movie and I'd have a panic attack, especially if it was a kind of movie that I'd never done before. The more experience you get working on a certain genre of movies, like horror films, you start to build up a repertoire of solutions to situations, dramatic situations. And from one horror film to the next, a lot of more often than not, so many of them share similar situations. So the more experience you get, of course, the more you are comfortable in coming up with a solution to that moment in the movie quickly. You know, it's kind of the point now where I see a scene, something probably will pop into my head, but if not, I'm sure by the third time something will pop into my head. I don't have writer's block, never really have. But in answer to your question, definitely when I started, because I was nervous, I would definitely try to in my mind. I'd run through, oh, what does this movie remind me of? What other movies, or what does this scene remind? What other scenes and whatever other movies does this remind me of? And I'd go hunt down and listen to the score. And again, in the early days, they didn't have videos, so I just listened to the record and see if that was acted as an inspiration. And generally what I found out was I would go in my state of panic and start gobbling up the scores of other composers, be they movie scores or classical or whatever. And generally what would happen is, though I never found what I was looking for, by deciding that I didn't like this score, or thought this score or that score was not going to work for the movie I was working on, it would help me get closer to being able to define what I did think was right for it. So, yeah, you know, it was a good way to get me closer to figuring out what the movie, the movie I was working on needed through the process of elimination, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with a composer starting off having their hand held by another composer whose music they admire, as long as it's appropriate for the film. I mean, if you're working on a horror film, don't sit around and listen to Elton John all day long. It's great and all, but it's probably not going to give you the answer to what you need for your horror film.
Yeah.
But you know, as Stravinsky said, you know, oh God, oh shit, I'm going to misquote it now. Borrowing means talent, stealing is genius, or whatever. I'm misquoting it. I've got this wrong. But basically what he's saying is stealing, there's nothing wrong with stealing at the beginning of your career, you know, just as long as you don't plagiarize exactly, and then you'll get into it. But to be guided, you know, through following in the footsteps of someone that you admire, that's good. I had a bunch of composers, film composers that I admired, you know, Herman being one. Everyone liked Herman, Bernard Herrmann. I loved Jerry Goldsmith. I studied with David Raxon, who wrote the music to Laura, The Bad and the Beautiful, and Forever Amber. Yeah, I followed in his footsteps, or tried to. Leonard Rosenman, Lawrence Rosenthal, Elmer Bernstein, the list just goes on. Yeah. And I got something out of each and every one of them by studying their music. And since there were no real classes on film music when I came out here in 1980, you were pretty much on your own. You know, you read books, you listened to records, and then finally got to watch video cassettes of the pictures, and that's kind of how you learned.
Yeah, I think music especially helped, like, at least for me, and, you know, I've heard of other people too that do this, is I love listening to soundtracks. If I'm writing a script for like a horror film or feature short, listening to music helps me get the creative juices flowing, because I get to, you know, it just helps. And especially too, you know, there's so many directors I admire. I kind of like to be in their mindset. Obviously, as you said, not copying them, but just be inspired by them. Try and think of something unique and special that's offering something a little different to the table. But yeah, no, I mean, soundtracks, man, are absolutely phenomenal. I love listening to your work. Especially like the.
I think most directors that I know, or writers that I know say, yeah, they love to have some, if they're doing a scary movie, have some scary film score, getting them in that zone.
Yeah, you need it. So
Yeah.
I like that little extra push. You just talk about yourself too with inspirations. What's one piece of advice you'd give your younger self starting out?
My younger self.
Yeah, if you could see your younger self, what's one piece of advice you would give them?
Yeah. Oh God, this is a very, very good question. And I would say, I wrote something down here. Yeah, and this may sound kind of direct and maybe too over the top here, but I would say to myself, if I could revisit me as a kid, I would say, please, please, you have every right to love yourself as you are right now, not who mom and dad would like you to be. You know, my childhood was spent with me, never feeling that confident or comfortable with who I was. It was always somebody else or something outside of myself that I needed to strive to become. I wasn't ever that confident in the things that were passing through my head. I always had music in my head, and it just was not a part of my mental composition that went over well at home. And so, I was struggling with that, and I didn't excel in academics or athletics. I was sort of always out and daydreaming and interested in things that didn't align themselves with most of the people in the classroom. And yeah, we've heard that story before. That's nothing new in that. Every creative person that I know has a similar story to tell. It's not like mom and dad were applauding them for failing mathematics, but coming home and with a well-written piece of music and thinking, well, that's okay. No, it didn't work out that way, and so I was kind of desperately, seeking, kind of attention and love that wasn't happening at home. It wasn't happening at home, and I was a drummer when I was a kid.
Yeah, jazz, right?
Yeah. I would sit behind the drum set, and all of a sudden everything was okay. I could do that. I did it okay as a when I was in my pre-teens, and then when I was in my early teens, and people around me would pay attention to what I was doing at that moment, and that was a good feeling. So definitely would be try to rid myself of this demon that has been chasing me throughout my life, saying, you got to be better, you got to be better, you got to be better. It's not enough, it's not enough, it's not enough. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you're probably really happy where you are in life too, because you accomplished so much. And
well, I appreciate that, but it never seems to be enough. It never seems to be enough. That I've gotten used to. 127 credits, as you mentioned. That's really exciting. But I can't help but think of
the next project.
Yeah, I mean, like Morricone, Ennio Morricone, who did like 500 projects, or Gary Goldsmith, who was in the 200 plus club. I mean, there's always someone who's done more than you. It's hard not to. I'm thrilled with what I've done. I've been the luckiest guy in the world. I'm proud of the music, and I'm so lucky. I mean, for sure. But just in part of my head says, what's the next one? What's the next one going to be?
Yeah, it's an exciting feeling, and especially too being in the industry that you're in. You never retire, so you can go as long as you want.
Yeah, I've never met anyone who intentionally retires. They are retired, I guess.
Yeah. To end off the interview here, I was wondering if you could talk about some things that you like to do when you're not composing. I know you're a collector. You have pretty good, solid collection I've seen online, and you're into like collecting pumpkin masks. Yeah, what kind of things are you up to, like when you're not composing?
Well, when I'm not working on a movie, there's plenty of musical projects that I have been following on my own. So music, if I'm not working on a movie, fortunately, it's not like I'm dead in the water. No, I mean, I've been reworking my old scores I've revisited them and I've been reworking them into like concert kind of suites, or rethinking them and trying to imagine how they might have been had they not been written for a movie. What would I want them to be? So that's been exciting, and I'm hoping to put that out on a box set that will have somewhere around 26 CDs in it, encompassing about 7 or 60 some odd scores that I've written. Now, other things that I do is I've gotten into taking black and white photography.
Oh,
And
nice.
an odd. I mean, it hasn't come out yet. I'm in the process of putting that together and hoping to release it. Strange stuff, dark black and white stuff. But putting that aside, when I'm not trying to create something, you're right. I love collecting. I'm like a crazy collector. You can kind of see behind me here.
Yeah, pictures. Yeah.
Those are some of the Aurora
Figures.
models of the Universal monsters that I've collected over the years. And behind the window, if you look, there's a window, and if you go back even further, you can see on that wall, those are framed autographed pictures of Universal horror actors.
Amazing.
And so I've got a lot of those autographs of composers from actors from the 30s and the 40s, and some from the 50s, and a few from the 60s, but that's about it. I love collecting, as you mentioned, jack-o'-lantern stuff, pumpkin masks. I have a gigantic collection of pumpkin masks. If I tilt this up a bit, you can see some of them.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You can see some of them up there. That's just a small part of them. The majority of them are in cases in the garage at my house.
That's awesome.
Other than that, I love interacting with large groups of people, at events or conventions, anything that in which people get together to celebrate something. I love to be there. If you know what I mean. Yeah. That kind of stuff.
Yeah. I know.
Weird things, seeing weird things. Anything that's a little bit offbeat, I love hunting it down.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm anxious for public events again in person, because I also love going to conventions, and it's always fun interacting with other people. That's why I love doing this show, because I get to interact with people like you, and it's really fun. And that's obviously people that I admire.
Great.
And before we go here, I'm going to get you to do that plug. So simply just state your name and say you're watching Geek Out Cinema.
It's Geek Out, right?
Yeah, Geek Out Cinema.
Right. Hi, I'm Christopher Young, the film composer, and you guys are watching Geek Out Cinema, and it's a great show.
That was awesome. I appreciate that. And Christopher, let's keep in touch. Maybe sometime down the road we can promote some of your other upcoming projects. And everybody, make sure to go check out Christopher on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, go check out his website and his IMDb, and you guys can listen to his music on Spotify and Apple Music. The links are down in the description below. And without further ado, I hope everyone has a great night. And thanks again, Christopher, for taking the time tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, my friend.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.